We're going to be talking today about something that has about 1,001 applications, correct applications. There are a lot of wrong applications that can be made, but we want to talk about how you present the gospel to people just in the incidences of life, and to do so in a way that doesn't trip people up and keep them from accepting the gospel or turning away. Now, in the scripture passage we're talking about today, there has been a rejection of Jesus Christ by the nation of Israel. And so it's very easy to say, well, in this situation, well, they don't want me, I don't want them. And let's not follow after him. Let's not do the right things. Let's not follow that. We're talking about unnecessary barriers to the gospel in Matthew chapter 17, verses 24 to 27. Now, this is the beginning of, there's been a change, there's been a turn, and Jesus is beginning now, and in chapter 18, he's going to be talking about, not talking about Israel, he's going to be talking about the church. What should the church do? How should the church live? What's going to be different in the future until the Lord returns? And that's where we are. We're in the period between the Lord's leaving and the Lord's returning. During that time, which we call the church age, what is it we're supposed to be doing? And how are we supposed to be doing this? Look with me at Matthew chapter 17. We'll begin reading at verse 24. On their arrival in Capernaum, the collectors of the temple tax came to Peter and asked him, "Doesn't your teacher pay the temple tax?" "Yes, he does," Peter replied. Wow, isn't that exciting? Doesn't it just thrill your heart? I mean, we're talking about everybody's favorite subject. Taxes. And taxes we don't have to pay. It doesn't affect us. You say, "Pastor, this is going to be a tough one. How is that going to apply to us?" Well, for us to understand that, we're going to have to see four things. One, we're going to have to look at what the issue was. What is this temple tax that he's talking about? We don't pay that today. Nobody in the world pays it today. It's just not charged. I started to open this sermon and think about something that applied to a lot of you and still may apply to some is, do you support the United Way at work? Well, it's sort of that type of a thing. It's that type of an issue. And it's kind of like, well, it's a little obscure. But the issue, we've got to understand what the temple tax was, and then we've got to understand what the issue about that tax was. What was the issue they were raising? What was the issue that was going to be dealt with? And then we're going to have to see, we're going to have to also understand something else that's pretty obscure to us, and that is how kings tax people. We have a totally different system of taxation than they had, or that kings had in those days. So we've got to understand the illustration and how Jesus was using it before we can get down to, well, what are we going to do with this? And that's where we're going. What are the principles we can learn from this, or the principle that we can learn from this passage and this instance that will help us as we present the gospel and make presenting the gospel favorably to people our priority? And that ought to be our priority. We're living in the last days. We're moments away from Jesus' return. It could be today. And the most important thing for us to do is to be a good testimony to Jesus Christ to the people around us so that they don't have to go through the tribulation. Or worse yet, so they don't have to stand before the judgment seat without Christ. So we want to do everything we can to keep from tripping people up by putting unnecessary barriers between them and the gospel. Now, the New Living Translation does a good job of translating this, but it's not the best. The New English Translation, I think, communicates something here that we need to understand. When these people are asking Peter about, does your master pay the tax, they're assuming he does. They're expecting Peter to answer, yes, of course, he does. And so they say it this way. After they arrived in Capernaum, the collector of the temple tax came to Peter and said, "Your teacher pays the double drachma tax, doesn't he?" See, the implication is, yes. And Peter replies, yes. The problem would come if Peter had said, no, of course he doesn't pay that tax. It's corrupting. It's a corrupt system. I've been to Jerusalem, and I've seen the way the courtyard of the Gentiles is run, and all the buying and selling that's going on. Jesus had already cleared it out once. He could very easily have said, well, no, we don't pay that tax. It's an unlawful tax. It's against the law. And Jesus is for the law and following the law the right way. Well, if he'd done that, he would have made a real problem. As it is, he made a slight problem by what he said, because he said, yes, he does. And Peter didn't know whether Jesus did or not. And besides which, he wasn't real sure if they had the money to pay the tax. So now he's opened his, I won't say big mouth, but he's opened his mouth and he's committed the Lord to something that he doesn't know if they can follow through with. And so he may make a problem when the time comes, because they weren't collecting the tax just yet. They were letting folks know on a certain Sabbath, we're going to be collecting this tax. And you need to have it ready. Got to give you advance warning. We need cash money. We need temple money. We need to be able to do this. And so he's got a problem there. What was the temple tax? Well, it was to pay for temple worship. It was to pay for the upkeep of the temple. It was to pay for providing the daily sacrifices and all the things that went on a routine basis in the temple. One precedent for this tax came from the governor Nehemiah, who, coming and discovering the horrible state the temple was in, that there were pagans living in the temple, that the services were being neglected, he instituted a tax and said, let's pay this tax to do this. And we find in Nehemiah chapter 10, verse 32, in addition, we promised to obey the command to pay the annual temple tax of 1/8 of an ounce of silver for the care of the temple of our God. This will provide for the bread of presence, that is, for the showbread, as some of the older versions would say, for the regular grain offerings and burnt offerings, for the offerings on the Sabbaths, the new moon celebrations, and the annual festival, for the holy offerings and for the sin offerings, to make atonement for Israel. It will provide for everything necessary for the work of the temple of our God. It was going to provide what was needed. It was a good tax. It was certainly taking care of something that was necessary. And yet this tax was controversial to some people. Some people objected to that. Now I know that surprises you, but there are people that object to things that are good. We used to have a saying that a guy that would talk about something that's going on that was good, and some people would kick on that, and they would kick on that, but kick on death and taxes. Well, people complain about things. There were people who found things to complain about this. One of the groups that we believe complained about this or said, hey, you shouldn't do this, are the Essenes. And these were the people who lived at Qumran, or their writings were stored at Qumran. And they objected to that. We have a statement in a document in the Qumran that says this: concerning the ransom, the money of the census which one gives as a ransom for his own purpose will be 1/2 shekel. Only once will he give it all his days. What are these people saying? Well, originally when it was set up, it was going to be a one-time payment. It was not to be a regular payment. And now they've imposed a regular payment. Have you ever heard of taxes going down or going away? Wow, it just doesn't. Well, that's nothing new. It's been that way. And they were saying, wait a minute, in the law, it says only one time. In fact, in the book of Exodus, it talks about this. Moses said, each person who is counted must give a small piece of silver as a sacred offering to the Lord. This payment is 1/2 shekel based on the sanctuary shekel, which equals 20 gerahs, and I know that told you nothing about it. That's okay. Just this is the amount. They were to receive this ransom money from the Israelite. That is a head count for everyone. They were to give this money every time they took a census, which was not often. They did one when they came out of Egypt, and everybody had to pay a tax. And then they did one in that second generation. After the first generation died off, they took a census. And that's why most people don't know the good stories of Numbers, because they get hung up on that first census and numbers of this and that. And until you get to chapter 7, you don't start hitting the really interesting stories. And maybe it's put in that way to kind of keep you from knowing the good stories if you're not really interested. But the good stories are interesting there. But I don't have time to deal with that now. So there was an objection to that. What was the temple tax for? Well, it was to pay for the temple. There was a controversy because some people said you shouldn't have a regular tax. You need to find some other way, although they didn't say some other way. And by the way, one corollary of all of this is you got to do it some way. A lot of times there isn't a right way to do things. There's just, this is the way we decided to do it. It's a way, it's a good way, it's all right. It's probably not the best way, because the best way is obviously the way you thought of. But the people in charge thought of doing it this way, and here's how they want to do it, and you got to do it some way. It's just like, the arrangement of chairs in here. I'm sure there's probably better ways of doing it, but you got to have a way, because it doesn't do to have chairs going this way and chairs going this way. I mean, it can really be kind of funky. You got to do it some way. Some way or the other, they had to pay for the temple. They had to pay for the services of the temple. And so this was the situation. The only reason one might think Jesus might be against this because he was against a lot of the corruption of the current system of worship in Israel. And it was very corrupt. We know in John he cleared the temple. Cleared that temple area. It said, my Father's house shall be called a house of prayer to all people. There were a lot of times that he was going to clean it out. He had spoken against the law and against the way that people were doing things and living in a corrupt manner. And so it's very easy for someone to think he might be against it. But Peter said, no, he's for it. And then Peter goes into the house, and Jesus raises the issue with Peter. Why does he do that? He doesn't, notice what he says, he doesn't give Peter a chance. He went into the house, verse 25, but before he had a chance to speak, Matthew points out, before Peter had a chance to say anything, Jesus asked him about what's going on. Now, how Jesus was able to do that and all of this detail, that's not Matthew's concern. The point is, Jesus raises the issue. I think Jesus, being God, knew what Peter was doing. He knew what Peter was saying even when he was out of his sight. But whether or not, or whether somebody told him what Peter had committed him to, however it works out, that's not Matthew's point. Matthew's point is, Jesus raises the issue first. He's not going to let it slide. He's going to deal with the issue. And so before Peter has a chance to speak, Jesus says, what do you think, Peter? Do kings tax their own people or the people they have conquered? What do you think? He raises the issue. And he uses a somewhat obscure illustration to us because we don't function that way. Now, the ESV does a good translation of this, and it's being shown to you on the screen. Well, it was. Can you run it back there for me, Luke? I've lost the ability to control things here. Obviously. Just go back one. Maybe two. There you go. From whom do the kings of the earth take toll or tax? From their sons or from others, that is, from strangers? Now, in our day, everybody pays tax. I think even the Queen of England is starting to pay taxes, which is an odd thing. It's like the government paying tax to itself. But in royalty, typically, kings don't pay taxes to themselves. The taxes are paid to them. And they don't charge their sons, the princes of the realm, they charge strangers. That is, people who are not part of their kingdom, not part of their royal family at least. I thought about this as I was traveling, and I remembered a good illustration of this. Hotel taxes. You go to a hotel and you pay a fairly expensive price to stay there, and then you find out it's higher than that because the local authority has said let's not tax the people in our community. Let's tax the people who are passing through our community. That makes good sense. You get elected, you raise money, you're able to do these things, and all these people passing through pay the tax. That's the way it works. That's what he's saying. Who do you tax? You tax your own people, or do you tax the people you conquered, as one translation says it? Do you tax your sons, the sons of the kingdom? Are they obligated to pay this tax? Or is this something that ought to be taxed to the nations that are conquered, to those who bring tribute? Well, obviously, it should be the thing to those who are being paid tribute. That's the way the kings of the earth operate. It's the established principle. And so Jesus says to him, therefore, the citizens are free. The sons, literally, the sons are free. They don't pay, other people pay. What Jesus is establishing is this: Christians don't have to pay to keep up the temple of God. Now, in Matthew's day, the church was composed of Jews and Gentiles. Now, the Gentiles obviously felt no great obligation to support the temple in Jerusalem, which at this point, by the way, has not yet been destroyed. Jesus in chapter 24 is going to predict the destruction of the temple, so much so that there wouldn't be one stone left on another. It was going to be wiped out. You wouldn't know where the temple was. You wouldn't know really where the great city was. You'd have to go down to the foundations to even have some idea of where this was. But it hadn't happened yet. There were a lot of Jewish Christians living in the land of Israel, in Jerusalem, and around Jerusalem, in Galilee, who were going down to worship, and they were participating in the worship in the temple. The Gentiles weren't, because they couldn't. They could stay in the courtyard, but they couldn't go in, they couldn't participate in that old system. But the Jews in Jerusalem, who were Christians, could do so. Are they obligated to pay the tax? No. So here, we are talking about something that whatever it is, whatever we encounter, it's something you're not obligated to do. But if you don't do it, you might give offense to people. Okay? You see the principle that's coming out of this? We don't have to pay this tax, Peter. But he says we don't want to give them offense. He said in verse 27, however, we don't want to offend them. And then it gets weird. So let's stop just a minute. We don't want to offend them. Literally, we don't want to be a stumbling block to them. Now here's an issue that it doesn't make any difference. It's not equal. But it's got to be done. We're not obligated to do it. But if I don't do it, it's going to make people think, why not? What's wrong with this? Is there something wrong here? Do they think there's something wrong with what we're doing? Maybe Christians are, they're you got a different standard, maybe not a higher standard, but sure is different. I wouldn't want to live like that. And we're putting an extra stumbling block, an extra tripping point to people who might come to Christ because of what we're doing. Let's use some other illustrations. Let's say somebody comes to you and says, I'm selling a box of cookies to support my organization. You say, well, I don't really want to support that organization, so I don't buy cookies from that organization because I don't appreciate their stand. Okay, is that what you really want to make an issue out of? And so the impression is given, well, Christians don't support this organization. You may want to say that. You may want to say, hey, I don't think you're going to take my money and use it in a good place. When at the plants, they want you to contribute to United Way. And I've heard people say that. Well, hey, you should do that. Of course, we're obviously benefiting by United Way here. We're in a United Way building that they're letting us use. It's wonderful. But I've heard people say that. Well, do you really want to make, is that really a gospel issue? Is that something you want to say, well, Christians don't do this? Christians don't support their community. Christians don't believe in helping others. Well, not unless we're teaching them the gospel. You know, sometimes you just have to help people because they're people in need. Not because they're Christians in need. They're just people in need. And there's nothing contrary to the gospel about us doing something good for people that are never going to trust Christ, as far as we know. Are never going to darken the door of a church, as the old expression used to be. Maybe even people that have rejected the gospel. Maybe they're following a different route. Maybe they practice Christianity quite different from us. And we're convinced they're not even believers. They're not even trusting Christ. It's, oh, wait a minute, there's the key, isn't it? What's the key issue in the gospel? Is it not, are you trusting Christ and Him alone as your Savior? That seems to be the essential of the gospel. Did Jesus Christ die on the cross to pay for your sins? Is God satisfied with that payment? So much so that He raised Jesus Christ from the dead. And Christ is now living. He's ascended into heaven and He's coming back. Is that not essential to the gospel? Is the fact that everybody on earth who's alive today is one day going to stand before God in judgment, is that not essential to the gospel? Is that not motivation to be seeking to not put any kind of a stumbling block between us and other Christians, or us and those who might become Christians? Because there's a greater issue involved. There's some people that don't like the version of the Bible I use. I keep it varying up so I equal opportunity to be a problem to people. I use different versions because sometimes some versions translate it better, to my understanding, the way I think in English than others do. Some are just wrong. So I'll tell you that's not it at all. But here's the point. We don't want to cause a tripping hazard to others. If the version of the gospel I use causes people to trip over the gospel, I think I need to change my version to make it clear. If I was in a church that used only the King James version of the Bible, you know what version I would use? King James version of the Bible, because I want to communicate the gospel clearly. I don't want to cause a problem to them and say, well, okay, if you don't use this Bible, then I have been asked to speak at camp. And so I wrote to the camp director and said, what version do you prefer that I use to teach students there to study the Bible? Okay? And fortunately, he wrote back and said, doesn't matter to us, whatever one you prefer to use. So, okay, that leads it back to me. So we'll work from there. But I want to be sensitive to that. We want to be aware of not creating issues. Somebody comes around and says, you want to support the public schools? We're selling whatever it is they're selling this week for public schools, to support the schools to do that. You could be obstinate and say, well, I pay enough in taxes, I'm not going to support your club or your group or whatever it is, and you give offense to someone, and then you lose the opportunity to share the gospel with them. They think you're old hard-nosed. They think, that gray hair and hard-headedness goes together. Unfortunately, a lot of times it does. You see, our issue is, I want to present the gospel clearly. And I don't want to confuse the issues. It doesn't matter to me if somebody makes a sign of the cross. I didn't get upset last Sunday when somebody raised their hand in church. Wasn't here, but it was in church. They don't normally raise hands, but somebody raised their hand. Well, that's okay with me. I've been around churches where they do that. I never have found out why, just one hand. Some places it's two hands. Fortunately, they've never, they did split over that, but anyway, I digress. Sometimes that can happen. Well, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you make the sign of the cross. It doesn't add to or take away. It's not the key issue. The central issue is not whether we have candles or lights or robes or whatever, or whether the choir wears robes, or whether you have a choir and a choir loft in the front or a choir loft in the back. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you contribute to schools. or you do things to help community organization. Those are non-issues, and that's what's going on here. We don't want to make something an issue, not an issue. It's not an essential. Some things have to be done. Peter is going to pay this tax for himself and Jesus. Well, actually, they're not going to pay the tax. Jesus and Peter aren't going to pay the tax. Let's go back to the weird thing that happens here. He said, do this. We're free. We don't have to pay the tax. Verse 27. However, we don't want to offend them. So go down to the lake and throw in a line. Open the mouth of the first fish you catch, and you'll find a large silver coin. Take it and pay the tax for both of us. God is going to pay the tax. We won't pay the tax. I want to establish the principle. I'm not obligated to do that. It's not part of our religion to pay this tax. It's not part of our religion to help with this in any way, shape, or form. But we'll let God pay the tax. Now, this is a weird thing to happen. Now, having said that, this is not the only incident of somebody catching a fish in the Sea of Galilee and finding a coin in the mouth. The fish do that. They'll scoop them up. It happened before. It's happened since. But for Peter to throw in a line and catch this and there's a coin in the mouth, what Peter is being taught by Jesus is God will provide what you need to do what you need to do. Money shouldn't enter into it. It's a matter of, hey, we don't want to give offense. Our Father will pay the tax for us. And that's exactly what happened. That's the way they paid for the tax. So, the tax was to support the temple. Some people objected to the tax because they thought they were overstepping the authority and it should only be one time, it shouldn't be on a regular basis. So there were people that opposed it. The kings of the earth don't tax their own sons. So God is not going to tax you and me to support his worship. That's not what he's going to do. He's going to take care of things. If he needs us to support his worship, he'll give us the funds to do that. By the way, he does do it. But that's not the issue. The issue is somebody has put you on the spot and said, do you do this? With implication, everybody who is a part of this community, everybody who's a part of this nation, everybody who's a part of this community does this, supports that. Will you support this? Or are you going to say, well, no, Christians don't do that, and therefore cause a problem to people? Or are you going to go ahead and say, no, we pay the tax, and then say, Lord, I got myself into it. I need you to help me get out of this. How are we going to do that? Now let me talk about how we should use this. Let me make some suggestions. There, as I mentioned it earlier, there's 1,001 possible applications of this. I thought of 3 or 4 that I mentioned. You may come up with some. I'm in a situation where somebody is asking me to do something. And if I answer negative, if I don't go along with this thing, then I may cause offense to the gospel. I may put a barrier in there thinking, we Christians are weird. I don't want to have anything to do with that. How do I handle that? Well, let me suggest some things. Number one, in using this, avoid even the appearance of evil. Avoid even the appearance of evil. 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 22 says this, stay away from every kind of evil. Here's the point. We're not talking about something evil. People aren't asking you to participate in something evil, something sinful, something immoral. It has nothing to do with that. What they're asking you to do is not immoral. Eating cookies is not immoral. It's just fattening. Okay. If you don't want to eat them, it's okay, because if you eat them, you get fat. But you also get happy, so it's a trade-off. We're not talking about something evil. We're not talking about saying, do you want to participate in this corrupt scheme? We've got this pyramid scheme, and you can make... No, we're not talking about something like that. Be very clear, that has nothing to do with what we're talking about today. It's not that. So it's not... We got to stay away from even the appearance of evil, as one of the old translations translates that. We don't want even to appear it to be evil in any way, shape, or form. We're not gaining anything out of this. We're not giving it so we can get that. No, we're staying even the appearance of evil. We don't even want to be associated with something that's evil. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about something that's not evil, But it also should not, we shouldn't refuse to do it because we don't want to create an unnecessary tripping hazard to people. Now, I've spent the last week in a nursing home trying to watch out for tripping hazards, trying to think about homes and what in a home could cause a tripping pattern for somebody that doesn't walk very well. So my focus has been on that. That's why this is a pretty good illustration, I think, of that. We don't want to cause people to trip up or it to be a hazard. By the way, you know the most important light in your house? Night light. It keeps you from tripping over stuff in the dark. We don't want to cause people who are in the dark to trip over something by turning off a light or causing them to say that's something. This would be an unnecessary tripping hazard. When I was in seminary, one of the ways that you find a church to go to is you sign up. Churches write in, we need a pastor, and we need you to sign if you want to send your resume to this church. And one of them was an apostolic Christian church. Let me get that back right. It was an apostolic Catholic church. I think that's really odd, that Protestant seminary. And this is really a church just like us. And I've read up on it since, and it was a breakaway from the Roman Church by a group of priests up in Illinois. And they come to know the gospel with the trust in Christ and realize that he wasn't in all the rituals and all the things they were doing, and they were doing some strange stuff at the time, even for our churches today. And they said, no, it's in Christ. And so, if I had gone to that church, I would have had to wear a Roman collar and dressed in different things, and I wasn't ready to cross that barrier at any point anyway. Plus, it was up north. We just grew up in the Yankee line. I wasn't ready to be that kind of missionary, But it's okay. They were a good, solid, gospel-preaching church. They just wore Roman collars. And they probably had the other things that go along with that and did different things like that. But that's okay. They were sound in the gospel. Don't make an issue of something that's not an issue. Let's make the issue what the issue is. Have you put your trust in Christ? And you're relying upon him only? Because you might be saved and you haven't trusted Christ only. You think I've got to trust Christ plus do this other stuff. And you're not enjoying your salvation because you're killing it. I've got to do all this stuff, and I do all this stuff, and I still don't know when I get there whether I'll be saved or not. Well, no, it's not dependent on what you did. It's dependent on what Christ did. When Christ died on the cross, he paid everything. Now we live as a thank you gift to God, the life that we're living. We're enjoying the power of God to help us live and do what's right. We're trying to live not so that we don't go to hell, but so that we are worthy of heaven. That we're already there. We're already living that kind of life. It's not to get there, it's because we've been made fit for heaven. And so let's live fit. When you go back to the Sermon on the Mount, that's what I was saying when we were walking through the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus was lifting up not just at what the law said, but look at what the greater righteousness is. This is the way we ought to press on the upward way. We ought to be looking for, how can I live a righteous life? We don't want to cause people to trip. We want to lift up and point them to Jesus Christ and point them to the better way of living now, because we're living on that eternal life right now. Third thing I would suggest to you, that we ought to adapt to the people we seek to reach. Paul writes about this in 1 Corinthians 9 and several places. He talks about it this way. He said, when I was with the Jews, I lived like a Jew to bring the Jews to Christ. Paul knew that living like the Jews and eating kosher and doing all those things had nothing to do with his salvation. But he said, I don't want to be a problem to Jewish believers. So when I was with them, when I was with those who followed the Jewish law, I lived under that law. Even though I'm not subject to the law, I did this so I could bring to Christ those who are under the law. I wanted to reach them. Now, when I was with the Gentiles who do not follow the Jewish laws, I too lived apart from that law so that I could bring them to Christ. What are you talking about? Well, Jews live kosher. They eat kosher. When I'm with Jews, I don't eat pork, he said. But when with the Gentiles, I eat whatever they offer. Because I want to reach them for Christ too. I'm not going to say, well, I'm a Jew, I can't eat pork. Pork is Unsaved pork will take you away from God. No. He said, I do whatever. We need to be thinking, what can I do to reach people? And that ought to be the priority of my life. Rather than, what's going to make me appear righteous? We ought to think, what do I need to do to reach these people? I have friends who hang out in bars with people. Not so they can get drunk, so they can talk to sinners. Not bad. What am I doing to reach people? Why am I hanging out with this person? It's because I want to reach them for Christ. I'm not going to sin. I'm not going to become a drunkard or drink. But I want to reach them for Christ. Maybe you've got an objection to eating pork. Okay. But when somebody invites you to their house and they offer you pork, you know what you need to do? Eat mashed potatoes. No, but you could eat a little pork and say, okay, for Christ's sake, I'm going to. Dr. Alden Gannett told one time in his, he had a stint where he was minister at large at United Unevangelized Field Mission. He went down to the jungles of Brazil. People brought him a grub to eat. And he said, I don't know if I can eat that. They saw some banana chips. So they made him a grub sandwich. Banana on the bottom, grub, banana on the top. He said, Lord, I'll get it down if you'll keep it down. And he ate it because you don't want to offend people. You don't want to put a barrier between you and other people. If that's what it takes to get to preach the gospel to people, to witness to people, to point people to Christ, then we'll eat grubs with bananas, if that's what it takes. You see, we've got to adapt our life to reach people for Christ. That's the purpose why we're still here. Do whatever is necessary to not offend people, but also to get the opportunity to reach them for Christ. If we're going to be successful, that's what we need to do to reach the Lord, the Lord's people. Let's pray. Father, we're here as your witnesses. Lord, we're in a world that's rejected Christ, with many religions that reject Jesus as the only way of salvation. Father, we're here to reach people with the message. Lord, we're not here to change their life, to get them to clean up their life, to reform their life. We're here to present them with the only life-saving message, the message of Jesus Christ. Lord, change our thinking. We're more focused on reaching people and adapting ourselves and our life in order to be able to reach other people. That, Father, we might be able to save some, because some will hear the gospel and you will save them. Lord, help us to be faithful witnesses, to not put unnecessary tripping hazards or barriers between ourselves and people who need to hear the gospel. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.